Melisa with Waldorf Essentials. So today we're going to talk about the child at 12. We've been doing this series about these mini cycles that happen about every 3 years. They usually are marked by like more independence, which is also it's also a time for them to be pushing boundaries and a time for you to probably be reevaluating boundaries and reevaluating where you are, where they are, how much responsibility they have, how much responsibility they need, that sort of thing. So these are aimed at really just sort of helping you work through these cycles. So if you have a 12-year-old or somebody who's near 12, this is a good video for you. So there's a couple of things. One, I like this piece. This just this little bit about that Steiner said about the 12-year-old. I'm pulling this from Rhythms of Learning, and he's talking about it in regards to the curriculum, as far as he's talking about why we bring physics to the child at this age. And this is that in 6th grade they get the beginning physics pieces, and then they're built on from there. And so this is what he says about the 12-year-old. Only when students turn 12 can they begin to look at themselves more objectively and begin to recognize how physical forces manifesting in the world are also at work in the human being. And actually, I'm just lying to you. I think that was Trostley that said that. It's possible. It was Trostley that said that, and not Steiner that said that. But still, it's he's saying that about something that Steiner wrote. So, anyways, this is a great book. If you are on this path for the long haul and you don't have this book, shame on you. Pick up this book. It's called Rhythms of Learning. It's by Roberto Trostley. There's a new edition out, so it looks a little bit different than this. But you can see mine is all tabbed up. I use this book a lot. Whenever I'm writing, I pull it out. I always pull it out when I'm getting ready to approach a new grade, just to refresh me. And what I like about it, this is really what, when I started 100 years ago, there was Steiner's lectures, and then there was this book. And this is all we had. We didn't have, we write curriculum now, but we didn't have all of that then. And so this book really sort of became my homeschooling Bible. I would say it's equivalent, for those that are coming from maybe a Charlotte Mason background, it's equivalent to those 3 books in that set that are things that she wrote. It's equivalent in that this is, it's compiled by Trostley. He does some digesting for you, which is nice if you're just starting with Rudolf Steiner. And what I like is there's enough pieces in here that you can go, I want to read more of that. And so he tells you exactly what lectures they're from. So you can go then and read the full piece. And that's how I did a lot of studyings of Steiner for a lot of years. I would read a piece from here and I'd go, I need to know more. And so then I would go read the entire thing. And that really was a great way for me to get my feet wet back then. That was, like I said, a lot of years ago. Now I always recommend that people start with this, and The Kingdom of Childhood, I think, is a really good place to start when it comes to his work. It was a work that he did later in his life, and so it has a little bit more continuity than some of the earlier pieces can feel. But all of the work is amazing. So if you need a little help, this is a really good one. I also like that this is broken down into age groups, and so there's a bits in here on kindergarten in the early years, pieces in here on understanding the bodies, understanding temperament, and all those things. So again, this is a really good book for you to have on your shelf. I would not say that, I think it's one that's important for every Waldorf homeschooler to have. And even though it's geared towards the classroom, you really understand sort of what the underpinnings of everything are. So again, Rhythms of Learning, I think it's an excellent book for your journey. And as we're getting ready to walk into the adolescent years, I'm going to say Between Form and Freedom by Betty Staley is another really good book. This is an excellent book for not so much the 12-year-old, but a big picture of adolescence, a big picture of what's coming with teenagers. So I would say that buy this book if your child is 12. Start to read it now, so you know what's coming, because it's super helpful. And I'll be talking about this book some more as we talk about the 15-year-old and the 18-year-old. But it's very good, and they're dividing it into traditional Steiner 7-year cycles, which is what we should be looking at, of course, overall anyways. We're just sort of talking about the little 3-year cycles that tend to happen and be in between there. So, the child at 12. I love I love the sixth grade curriculum because it absolutely meets the child of 12 perfectly. They're in this place where for the first time you might be looking at your child and they might be seeming a little materialistic. Maybe they're wanting more things. Maybe they're wanting to venture out more. They're wanting to have, more adventures and more. So that this is all beautifully matched in the curriculum. The curriculum starts with the story of the Romans and all of this conquering and all of this we gotta have kind of thing. But at the same time, they're innovating and they're seeing new things and they're coming up with things that we still have today. The freeway or the highway system, inns along the side of the road, the aqueduct system, all of those things that we still have bits and pieces of today started then. So it's very soothing for the child to understand those pieces. And so Rome and the stories that happen with regards to Rome are a perfect match for the sixth grader. And so I've loved watching those wheels turn because they're starting to really understand more. And there is a huge difference between an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. So Sam just turned 11 last week, and he has a friend that's 12, and there's just a difference. He has a couple of friends actually that are 12 or about to be 12. And there's just a difference in their countenance and how they're seeing things and, the way they're looking at the world, the way they're looking at their peers that are younger than them versus their peers that are older than them. So, there's definitely a huge difference between just those 2 years. There's so much that happens sort of between 11 and 12. So if you've got a child that, that's about to be 12 or is 12, take a look back and start to think about, what they looked like when they were 11, how they act. And the child of 12 seems very firmly planted here, very firmly planted, where, they might have not felt totally that in the last 2 years. You might have been seeing it more and more at 11. What I love that I'm seeing about Sam now is he just had a birthday, and Sam is number 4 out of 5. And, he's still very much loved. Like he wanted, I said, are you outgrowing me wrapping your presents in silks? And he's like, no, please wrap my presents in silks. So because I wanted to make sure that he was not feeling weird about that. No, he still has his feet firmly planted a little bit in that childhood place, but very much still looking forward to things. So over the next year, I expect that he's going to be much more looking forward to things, and his toes might still be dipping into the childhood place. And then they cross this Rubicon at 12 that it's evident that they can't go back. It's evident that they're on this trajectory forward, and going back to being little is not possible, and that can be kind of traumatic for them. Most of them are already feeling that from the 9-year change. They're sort of getting that they're not that little person anymore. So it's your job to sort of make sure that they still get plenty of hugs, still get a lot of love, that they're still, because they still need it. And some kids will ask for it, some kids won't. When I look at the temperaments of all of my children, I would say that number 1 and number 4 ask for it the most. And they're phlegmatic in temperament, and so they really love comfort. And getting hugs from mom or snuggling up with mom is something that I don't know that Harry is 20. I don't know that they're ever going to outgrow it. They just sort of want to have that closest because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel comfortable. Where my other two, number 3, are a bit more on the melancholy and definitely sanguine end. And so they didn't seek it as much. But as they've gotten older, I've sort of watched that, where they've wanted to come back and go, oh, wait a minute, I really like this person. I really want to be with mom and dad. And so it's sort of a little bit scary, a little bit bittersweet and sad place to be. So, if you've got a 12-year-old, I'm going to guess that your biggest challenge right now is, what should be my next boundary that maybe gets relaxed? And oh no, they're already pushing at all of the things, all of the media, all of the things that maybe their friends have access to that you don't have access to in your home. And so, people often ask, what things should I be thinking of? And so, definitely by 12, and if you don't have older children, then this won't feel as apparent. But by 12, they're asking for, hey, can I watch Harry Potter? Like, can I watch that by myself? And if you've got younger kids, that becomes sort of a struggle. So what we do with Sam, just so that he can still feel like that big kid, and he definitely does not have full reign of media. Not. Also very careful about anything PG-13, because there's a reason why it's PG-13, and some PG-13 should not be seen by 13-year-olds. So, Eric and I are very careful about what media he goes to. He and his dad read comics together, so there are some things that they do, but not all things. People would say, oh, well, do you take him to see this, and that? And not all things. One of my rules about the Marvel movies is that if they have passed it in history, so like say Thor, yes, Sam's seen Thor because he's been through 4th grade. We've done the Norse mythology. I wanted him to have, and I've done this with my others too, since the Thor movie started coming out, I want them to have a good grasp of Norse mythology before they go see that version of it. I want them to really know, so that they're comparing the movie version to what they know, rather than the movie version to what they're then learning. And so I also am really careful about any of the movies that have to do with war. And so that would be like maybe the new Wonder Woman movie. That would be the first Captain America movie, because it deals with World War II. And the reasons why I am really careful about those movies is because I want them to really understand what's going on behind the scenes, what's going on behind the war. And so it's really important for me to sort of stick within that continuity with regards to Steiner. So Captain America, I don't think, in my opinion, is really not, what goes on there is more than just the superhero movie, definitely. And so, in my opinion, it's something that's very much suited for like the 8th, 9th grade child, because they're learning about World War II, and they can understand, because they are understanding how bad the stuff was with Hitler. Then they can understand the Red Skull a little bit better. Beforehand, it's just this movie with fighting, and so yeah, I know I have some weird rules about that, and some husbands go, what? She'll let him see this, but not that. But actually, my husband is totally on board with that, because he totally agrees and totally gets it, because we are really careful about what things we bring to them. And then with Wonder Woman, that takes place like in World War I. Obviously, in the comics, sometimes it took place later, and the continuity is a little different. But there are things that are going on that it's really handy to not have to sit and explain, well, these people were fighting these people, and this is what was going on, and this is how bad it was, because they're not ready for that information. They're ready for that information when they're about 14. And so that's really a great time to take them. Now, I thought the new Wonder Woman movie was fantastic. And, a lot of people just want to take their girls because it's such a good girl power movie. I'm agreeing with the fact that it's a girl power movie. I still would be very careful about what time they go to see it, because of what's going on in the movie. So those are my thoughts as far as like older movies. People ask me all the time, what about Harry Potter for a 12-year-old? Absolutely. I think that if they're reading the books, so my rule on that one is read the book, then we'll watch the movie. And I've had some cautioning from other moms about it, because I personally haven't read past book 5. And so I know people say, how can you do that? I was busy. Book 5 came out. It seems like book 5 came out right as I was getting a divorce, and I didn't have time after that, and so I need to go back before Sam gets there, because I've read everything else to that. So after book 5, we're going to take a break, because like I said, he is 11. I think we're going to take a break for a year or so, and that means we're not going to watch the movies until after that. And that's the house rule that we have. It doesn't have to be your house rule, but the reasons why I have those rules, one, so my husband has a degree in film, and so we're forever as a family going, well, let's look at the literary piece and then look at the film piece, because then you can see what the original author intended versus what this director did with it. And sometimes it's very close, sometimes it's not. You know, you can look at The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings got a lot of flack when it first came out about some of the lines that they, and some of the things that they completely just didn't put in there. Well, I want my kids to be able to know, what is it that you know, it's not just a movie. It was a book first. And sometimes I take them to things I didn't realize it was a book first. And so so that's on me. But usually when there's a book first, I'm like, we're going to read the book first. And so and the same with the Chronicles of Narnia. So I was thinking about that the other day. We were talking about beavers. So I bring up this piece on YouTube from the Chronicles of Narnia, from the beaver scene in the first movie. And I was like, oh, Sam, you would love these movies. Then I said, oh, wait a minute, but we're going to read the books first. He's like, Mom. I said, no, we're going to take the Harry Potter break, then we'll read the Chronicles of Narnia. And I had read the Chronicles of Narnia to all of the books, to my younger, or my older ones. But so think about those things. When it comes to they're sort of changing in age, what is it that's okay with you? And I know a lot of parents will say, I'm not going to sit down and read the dang book before I take them to this movie. And that's totally fine if that's your rule. Totally fine. But it's a rule that we like, because it allows us, as a family that does enjoy film, it allows us to sort of see what the author wanted versus what the director did. And, you know, we've done that with the fairy tales too. So Sam is huge about fairy tales. And so when Once Upon a Time, the TV show, came out, that was something that he and I watched together for a while. He got a little freaked out about, there was one episode and then he stopped watching it for a while, but we're watching things like that together. When we go, you know, we have, it's not a secret, we have Disneyland passes, so we go, and but he's very like, okay, so this is what the original says and this is what happens in the show, and they don't watch. Just because we go there doesn't mean that they have free access to every Disney movie, because that's not how our house is. It's definitely not something that they don't go together in our you know, in our world. So just because they have one where we go and have fun doesn't mean they have the other. And so we enjoy having those conversations about what the author intended versus what the film brought forward. So have those talks with your kids. They're on this place, especially as they're, you know, heading into this 12 plus place, where they're starting to think critically. Now, their intellect really isn't born until they're about 14, but you're starting to see seeds of it now. That's why that's why the science curriculum starts to get deeper in grade 6. That's why you're seeing more. That's why you're probably like freaking out if you're planning grade 6 for the fall, because there's so much more than there was in grade 5. And it's just, it gets deeper and deeper. And so my suggestion there is, don't freak out. Take a deep breath. If you're writing your own curriculum, get some help. And at least so that you know what a spine or a backdrop for that would look like. Slow down and don't worry so much, because I think that you will get it all in. The important things for sure for 6th grade are really for them to see that transition of the Romans. I find it incredibly educational to view the life of Christ from that perspective, Christian or not, because I think that as a Christian, I look at it and I go, holy cow, these people were so mean to him, and they were his own people. And I think that's an important distinction to make, that I think that often that gets lost when we're walking around as Christians and we're just looking at it from that perspective, rather than looking at it from a more worldly perspective of, okay, talk to me about, like, because one of the things that, because I am this weirdo that likes to know exactly what the literary piece read and what people then do with liberties. I think it's way cool to know that Mary and Joseph, they probably traveled on a marked highway, because guess what? They were a part of the Roman Empire, and that's part of what was going on there. The thing about the inn that made it so odd was that there would have probably been several inns. And so if there was no room at any of them for them to end up in a stable, the stable was probably more like a cave than it was like a regular stable. So it's interesting to see what people have done with just that story versus what the history of that would have been. And yes, it would have been an uncomfortable journey, and because she was 9 months pregnant on the back of a donkey, hello. And so, yeah, that would have been uncomfortable, but they probably would have been on a marked road. There probably would have been other people there with them. It probably was not as severe as sometimes we get in retellings of that. It was probably a very beautiful time, but it was probably not nearly as scary. Scary in some ways because, again, hello, she's on the back of a donkey and she's probably only 14 or 15 years old. Yeah, about to have a baby that's going to change the world. So yeah, I mean, I think there's ways to look at it from a world perspective that that helps you understand the story. It would be, I would think, and because I haven't always been a Christian, immensely helpful if you are not a Christian to understand it from that perspective, because then you can see why, why it did change the world. You have to see the progression of it. You have to understand what's going on with the Roman army. You have to understand all of that. You have to understand all of these Jewish people that rejected him after they had accepted him and he was teaching in their temples. And so it's a very interesting story if you look at it from a different perspective than what you sort of are used to looking at it. I also think the life of Muhammad is very interesting for sixth graders. And the first time I went through sixth grade and I prepared for those, I was like super intrigued. We definitely, that year, they read the New Testament, not all of it, but some of the stories, obviously, surrounding Christ's birth. And you read the Quran. And there are a lot of moms that say they're really uncomfortable with that. And I tell them, you know what? This is about teaching your child to be of this world and not worldly. You want, because I have a lot of moms, and they're not necessarily Christian moms. They're like, I'm not super comfortable with reading all this scripture because it's not our scripture. This is not what we believe. And I always say, listen, you want to teach your child about these cultures. If you don't, you're making them ignorant to them. You want them to understand these cultures. If you're wanting there to be peace in our world, you have to understand where people are coming from. And it begins with these cultures. It begins with understanding. So you've understood, hopefully, the Jewish people in grade 3, and you're still continuing with that education because they were 9 and younger then. You're continuing with that. Oh, remember last year when we studied Passover? Oh, remember last year when we studied Hanukkah? Oh, remember, you're bringing that forward, and then you're bringing forward the events that happen in the New Testament so you can understand, so from a used to be pagan perspective, then I understand Jewish people, and I get to understand Christians, and I get to understand Muslims. I get to understand all of this. And in 5th grade, I get to study Buddha. So all of these pieces that come together that help you to be a much more rounded individual. So you understand the culture and the things that are behind all of these religions. And once you understand that, it really helps you to empathize with your fellow man a whole lot more. And that was one of the things that Steiner said. Steiner said we needed to have our basic material needs met. We needed to know how to be kind and get along with our fellow man. And we needed to have freedom in education. And freedom in education means we understand those things and we learn those things. So don't be afraid and put off by things that maybe you don't know or don't understand. Often when we say no, it's because we don't understand things and because we're looking at the world through the current media garbage that's been thrown at us. So peel that back and actually understand. And that I think that's huge. Go visit a mosque. Go talk to some people that are Muslim. If that is a fear of yours, go talk to them. They're just normal people like us. And the same for Christians. I can remember when I was pagan thinking, those Christians, they irritate the crap out of me. You know what? Then I became one. Go figure. But I understand. I remember being in that place, and I remember having this hard heart and stiff neck and wall around me that I thought, ain't nobody getting in here. And because I didn't want to be converted. I didn't want that. So you have to take those blinders off, and it's not about conversion. It's about understanding. And it's about really seeing all the sides. And when you can give that gift, or open that door to the 12-year-old, you are helping them gain this greater capacity that they won't have gained otherwise. I guarantee you their public school counterparts aren't gaining that capacity. They may have lots of friends of different faiths, but they're not understanding the way your child will be understanding. And we have the opportunity in the home, different from the Waldorf school, we have the opportunity in the home to go as deep as we need to help our kids understand that. Now, of course, you don't want to offer a college class on Christianity or on Islam when you're in 6th grade, but you have the opportunity to sort of understand the culture, understand what makes them the same and what makes them different. One of the things we do in 6th grade is just sort of look at from a surface view, not a very deep view, because you'll do that later in the high school years. You're looking from a surface view. Okay, so now you've studied this and you've studied this and this. What makes them the same? Oh, look, they all have the same idea that we should love one another. We should be kind to one another. That they all have this common thread. So where does it get mixed up? And the children, especially, they're 11, 12, they're starting to hear what people are talking about a whole lot more. So you're going to get questions like, why is it like this? Why does it sound like on TV that Muslims are mean to everybody? I don't want to believe that, because this is what I'm learning at home. And that's your opportunity to say they're not. It's just that the media has a really good time picking on people. And it gives you an opportunity to go, you know what, we don't listen to that media source because it's biased. It gives you the opportunity to discuss bias and understand sort of what things are part of this world that, that is not necessarily true and accurate. And it gives you the opportunity to learn yourself if you don't already. And I feel like it's a very humbling year, and as far as academics go, but also you see so many more things within your child. They are hopefully open to humility in a lot bigger way. They're open to understanding. They're like I said, they've crossed this space. They know they're not going back to childhood. They know that there's bigger and greater things. So there's going to be some fear that comes along with that. You might have seen the seeds of that in their 11th year a bit. I'm seeing the seeds of that a bit with Sam. Oh, Mom, I just want to be here. I know, but we're going there, so let's go. I'll hold your hand while we go there. So, you're probably going to see those seeds, and you may have more struggles. You may be like butting heads more at 12. There were a couple of my kids that we did butt heads at 12, and they might get into some trouble at 12. I think that we have to always be aware of what they're listening to, who their friends are. This is definitely not a time to decide you don't need to hold the space with your older kids. I have said, and I will say again, we have an open bedroom door policy. Unless you're in there getting your clothes changed, I want that door open, especially if you're in there with friends. You need to still be listening, Mom. You need to still be sort of knowing what's going on, because they are they're being much more influenced by other children, by friends, and maybe by family that they've looked up to, and they're trying to understand, and they're trying to understand why this aunt or uncle has this opinion and it's different from yours. They're trying to have that understanding in a much more intellectual way than clearing notifications, much more intellectual way than they did before. And so, it's a time for you to be able to talk to them in a different way than you could even a year ago. So, have your wits about you. This is your time to really make sure that you know your stuff and that you've studied. And so if you're teaching school this year, be prepared. If you're not, take a deep breath and say a prayer for their teacher. And just really sort of walk forward with them and have a good time. I mean, even though that they're not firmly planted in childhood anymore, they're sort of looking forward. They still really need you to be there and to have fun with them, to laugh. They love board games, all kinds of fun things that they want to have, and listen to them. Listen to what, like Sam and his dad watch a TV show called Adventure Time that definitely for little boys at that age. And there's some girls that like it too. So that wasn't necessarily meant to be a sexist remark, but it's definitely not something that's in my world because it's so silly that I go, my silly meter goes up. The choleric in me goes, can't do it. So it's something that they watch. But when Sam wants to have a conversation with me about Finn the Human, I am all ears listening. Why? Because even though it bores me to tears and it drives me crazy, I want him to know that I am listening. Now, I will say, hey, honey, I want to hear what you had to say. I need 5 minutes. And he'll say, okay. And he'll come back and he'll talk to me in 5 minutes and tell me. And that's my job to make sure that I go back to him and say, okay, I'm completely all ears now. I want to hear. Or, look at this cool book that I got. Will you sit down and look at this with me? They're seeking ways to connect with us that are different than before. Now they want to connect with what's going on up here for us, where before they just wanted our energy maybe, or they wanted, they're like sort of like I think of the old Looney Tunes cartoons, not Looney Tunes ones. Anyways, the ones that the giant chicken, and he had the little chicken, or the big dog, and he had the little dog, and the little dog was hopping all around. That's what's happened in the earlier childhood years. Now they're seeking to really understand and to really want to interact with you in a different way. So listen to those cues. Listen when they say, hey, come and look at this book with me. Sit down and look at the book with them. Do not be too busy to do those things, because they will stop asking. So don't ignore. They will stop asking. They'll assume that you don't have time for them intellectually. Don't allow that to happen. You want to make sure that they sort of know that you want to know, that you want to be with them. So anyways, that's the 12-year-old. 15-year-old is next week. That's a little more interesting. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will see y'all later. Bye now.